We move on with our seminar with the second keynote. And I'm happy to introduce the second keynote speaker, Gunita Kuļikovska, who comes from Latvia and is working in a company called Vividly. She has been working on and studying on participatory planning synergies with XR. So another stimulating keynote ahead of you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. That's one of the. Thank you for the word. I won't go really then into the briefing of my background, and just get hands-on, sleeves rolled up onto the thing. Participation, planning with XR, thinking beyond the hype. That's basically the main headline I want to tackle here. And as well, that's my role in this, is not to give you an answer, so give you titles or the right stuff. It's to sort of give you hints and let you to think differently, or come up with the points on how you can think about immersive technology and in the projects in urban planning in your local sites. Just to give you a brief, so that I'm not just like a tech nerd, actually coming from architecture and design, strategic design aspect, and a company that established a few years ago gathers all these compounds from understanding about built environment, brand strategy / communication, and immersive technology. So it's not just about sort of developers that are hiding in the basement and just doing those nerdy VR experiences. That's much more and beyond that. The future of immersive technologies is a lot about a future of the computation and a new medium, and therefore I'm always sort of raising a question whether that's a technology or it's really a new medium, a new ways and new manners of how we do things. Because basically, together with the artificial intelligence and the big data movements, it entirely changes the way and how we look at the world and the way how we interact with the world, and probably yet in the ways that we are not able to imagine yet. And I sometimes refer to it as our ability to simulate our desires and our fears and our well-being. And probably, kind of dig deeper into ourselves than we are able to do that now in the physical world. And the virtual worlds can indeed teach us about engagement and participation with the physical world before we actually get to that point. Therefore, we can sort of have an option to build the better physical worlds, which I guess this is the connection that we are having in this project as well. There is no grammar for immersive technology. However, there is one common compound, and that is that there is not just audience. Let's say audience is not just audience anymore. With immersive technology, the audience is participants. It's you, me, those of us who create our own experience. And we have to keep that in mind while thinking about this very overhyped space. And what we should really pay attention to is that we, better than others, know that the spaces that we create around us, the cities, the architecture, the interiors are the ones that shape our societies, our political systems, and our personalities. And therefore, if we look at the immersive space, indeed, we have to take a step in, and we cannot ignore this new medium, like we couldn't ignore as well the digital medium. But digital medium that we've been living so far has been based on designing within the frames, right? So buttons, clicks, screens. So we've been so far designing within the screens, and that has put us into being more as an observer, so basically grasping that evidence of the information rather than truly interacting with that information. So as opposed to that, immersive technologies and XR that we all referring in this case are the ones that actually allow us to dive deep into the content and dive deep into the experience, putting the user or us in the main role of the storytelling, rather than being just put in the front of the fact or information. So we have to shift our thinking, from creating from frame to frame into creating within the space. And I think for us as a spatial people, that's probably the real medium where we can unleash our powers. And by allowing to dip into this storytelling, we can really work with the stories and feelings and emotions. And in fact, again, we get to the power of what this medium is targeting the perceptual levels of one's brain functioning and cognitive functioning. So the brain have this amazing ability to connect the dots and fill the gaps, and therefore by giving you a circumstances of information rather than just showing you the information visually. And knowing all of that and looking at the immersive technology beyond the glasses or phones or any kind of gadgets, how do we not mess up our sort of a long-term vision, and just like build this one-off campaigns. And I'd say that's a huge problem within the industry, and it was at the first wave of the XR technologies back in 2014-15 when it experienced a raise. Was a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, everyone is investing in let's say in VR, a lot of money, and not knowing what's actual reason beyond that. What's the purpose of it? How's that tackles in the whole journey? And therefore, we started basically back there with the question of what. So we were, VR is amazing. Let's invest in VR, and then just started to ask the questions. The right order of asking the questions would be, firstly, understanding the why, and then secondly, understanding how we're going to reach that why. And just at the end of the story, we can choose the technology that we wish to express this storyline. And the why refers to this the strong call to action of what, let's say, we in the cities, we want to communicate. Do we want to raise awareness? Do we want to, sell apartment? Do we want to tell a story? Do we want to create empathy towards some feelings? How is addressing the whole journey of the user or the audience? And thinking about the participation, again, it's not just about seeing something in VR, not just about visualization itself. It's about how do we basically escalate the whole experience, whole participation journey for the person, for the community, for the scale that we choose. And just then we choose the platform within which we would like to operate or work, depending on how wide or narrow our audience is, okay? So if we want to reach the whole city, probably we should go for the web solutions that are not as high-end immersive technology with a heavy infrastructure, but are lightweight and participative web applications that are accessible to anyone and easily been shared, or the mobile or the location-based that are, kind of lounges around the city that present the future projects. As well, in all of this, it is very essential to address that, again, it's not just one piece, one milestone. It's the whole metaverse in a way that we are creating, and we cannot forget that we have to, we cannot ignore that we have to collect the data, the digital data that comes before the participation or before actually designing anything, meaning that we have to transfer, we have to shift towards digitalizing our infrastructure in order to be able to build on top of it. What I'm addressing here is, for example, the AR cloud on top of which you put in applications, on top of which you are using the information and allowing it to look at it from various angles, right? So there are many systems that, that actually allow you to capture the data. It all refers to process integrity and the whole workflow, not just about visualization, not just about one-off campaign. It's integrated process that facilitates the communication all along. And we could somehow define it as a digital twin of the cities or 3D model. So a lot of cities use that as a part of their business model as well. So they collect the data and then they're able to launch new revenue streams on selling that or basically allowing to use that data for different applications. And from there, you can again use the different platforms of immersiveness in order to reach your result. And basically, just to give you sort of a very, very brief steps on how you can actually practically apply that right away without any, kind of further explanations, how we can address some of the challenges that are most relevant. We could say that there are two directions of how these challenges could be sort of put. Inbound, or let's say communication in between the stakeholders around the project, let's say Rail Baltica case in Riga. So various departments, the mobility, the urban department, the architects, the business side. So everyone has to be on the same grounds in order to be able to discuss and make decisions. So facilitating decision-making process within the shareholders or stakeholders. And outbound, which allows you to much earlier in the project to sort of, to put the information out, to visualize that to the public or to the community. Meaning if you have that digital sketch even of the concept, you're able to tell that story to the public and they become the ambassadors of that vision. Not just the public that you address the fact that something is going to be built. You rather involve them into that vision. And then those stages that you can start with, of course, the vision and the vision and the concepts. Just the practical points, for example, vision competitions. So when you organize the architecture or just the urban competition, request for a digital model, request for the model that is ready to be seen in an immersive manner in the VR, for example, or ready to be used for AR application. It allows you as well to, as I mentioned a little bit before, raise awareness earlier in the project. So probably even involve the jury members that are not in the place and are able to evaluate the project, being remotely across the world, like it was, for example, in New York Affordable Housing Challenge. By visualizing, digitalizing this content, this concept, we were able to reach a much wider audience and very early in the project, before even knowing the result. Branding, of course, because like as earlier, you start to involve as better the brand is created, or stronger the relationship between the audience and the project, for example. Option analysis is already in the design part. So again, earlier in the process, you're able to, not just from the top, but really from the user perspective, to analyze the volumes, the connections, the flow charts, the heat maps in the real time. The complex and more simplified structures you're able to bring into the context of experiencing them. And user simulations as a very good tool. For example, people with fewer opportunities. How do they experience this particular junction? Or how do they navigate? Where do they look? Where do they pay attention to? That allows you to improve the design and decide on the better options. This is a very a large urban project, so therefore the analytics are in a different scale. But you can bring these things in any scale you want. And thirdly, as well, the communication. By bringing this data in the digital realm and also the virtual one, and like kind of merging together with all the other powers of technology. For example, the chatbots. You just launched the let's say the volumetric concepts on the web and send the link to all the inhabitants of that neighborhood, and they open it on their phone and they have a chatbot saying, "Hey, how do you feel here? Do you have any ideas about this space? What are you thinking about that? What are the services that you have been using in this place?" So therefore allows you to sort of interact with your audience and in the real time without, kind of making the gatherings and scheduling the meetings and so on and so forth. This is very accessible and shareable, which, uses the power of internet at the end of the day, and each of us has a mobile phone in our pocket wherever we would be. So if the notification pops up, "Hey, you have a new project coming up in your neighborhood," it's something that you would pay attention to, rather than having a leaflet, somewhere around the block saying, "Sometime in a while there's going to be this gathering, and it's going to affect your life." Yeah, and the final note comes into the simple tagline that XR is not about hardware. It's also not about just building a platform or software. It's putting the experience as a core of the value, and especially in the urban planning, on really maximizing the value out of that experience and creating the stories that are based on experience. Bow. Drop the mic. Thanks.
Thank you for inspiring us. Okay, questions? Comments? Padlet? Annie, can you help with the Padlet, please?
I know there's going to be a lot on the way, because there are some first whys that you have to come up with before you start to get into this part, I guess, right?
We have at least two questions. Being too well immersed in virtual or extended reality, is it not dangerous in terms of losing a connection to actual reality? People's attention span is already a huge problem today with digital tech. How do you comment on that?
There are two different, let's say, things mixed together. But first of all, dangerous. It is dangerous if you play with like really direct reality, and I'm really against copying, let's say, the physical reality into virtual reality. In fact, the power of what you're trying to kind of deliver to you, the messages, that power of the immersive worlds is in the power of connecting the circumstances. That's how we actually have the feeling about the space. It's not about, is it like a wood or concrete or white or whatever the color. It's about the atmosphere, okay? So space is about atmosphere. So virtual reality tries to communicate atmosphere, not reality. So it's interesting to actually see a different variety of the virtual reality experiences, which, let's say, one is super photorealistic, another is not realistic at all, but plays with the sound, with a little bit of a notion, and how your brain actually, in your perception, gets more emotional, let's say, feeling of that from that experience that is not realistic. So it's true that the person's brains actually don't really differ the virtual reality from the reality. So therefore it affects as well your memory. So what you have done in the virtual reality, your brain understands and remembers as you would be doing that in the physical reality as well. You can use it for good, because that's where it's applied a lot in the learning, because new synapses are created in your brain, and that allows you to kind of build them permanently later. And attention span, that's a little different thing, because like in VR and immersive worlds, okay. It's a complicated question. Attention span is a problem when you don't really interact or are you not involved. But if we use the power of immersive media, which are based on emotions, on feelings, then there's a little different category of the attention span, let's say.
We take a question from Steven, and then we can have a look at the second question on the panel.
Thanks for a very nice talk. Is it possible in your imagination that you could capture the experiences of the users of urban space and create a virtual reality for the urban planners? You sort of shift it upside down, because this is what we're trying to do.
Exactly, and when you were showing that one of the heat maps, I wanted to actually refer to it. I think it's a very powerful real-time tool. Well, like ultimately, we could imagine just by passing, by a street, and we would have a notification saying, "Hey, like, I don't know, you're living in another side of the city, but you're working here. There are new developments coming up in this area, and seems like you're using services at the place where you are living that could fit to the program of like where you're working." So ultimately, you would have as well the visual reference to that data on what could be built, and taking the participation. That's one linkage. Another is, I don't know if we have to just like capture or scan, the spaces around people or how people use them. It is possible for the research needs, but not really sure if we would need to do that, like really virtually from each person along the city on the sort of daily basis. I think that could serve as a really good sort of analytical tool, but we can do that with other technologies as well. And the virtual is, again, the power of virtual is that immersiveness. So for planners to immersive and use a story, yes. Like for you to become a person on a wheelchair and test your designs, awesome. This is where the way to go, right? So entirely different perspective. But so in use cases, in some of the use cases, that would be very cool.
Yeah, let's take the other question from the panel. The website of Vividly offers to book a demo. What is the price of such service? How to motivate people building a city area? Can't remember the second part of the sentence.
Basically, we got the question. How to build a city
area, etc., to use this in order to increase public participation.
Well, I think I tried to answer that in the keynote, and let me get it here, and it's like here, right? So it starts with the why, then it goes with asking like how you can really do that, and then just about the what. So in terms of the price, the same thing. So depending on the scale, on the call to action, on the execution plan. At the moment, technology is not like we were discussing that before in the AB. You can't scale it that easily because it's based on that quality of the content and that experience. You can't just simply like take the experience and build it in another place. Therefore, it makes it quite resource intensive to build it one by one. However, you can come up with the patterns that you can apply, and that's probably the easiest way. How to increase the participation? By answering these questions and starting with why. Understanding which is the scale that you want to target that interaction. Because if you're gonna, build the high-end location-based VR for the general public, those things won't really fit together. And this is actually my job at the moment, trying to redesign, redefine sometimes a user journey in order to understand where does this immersive content plug into it, into the whole user journey, and not be as a standalone application. We have a VR, we're awesome, we're novel, we're a cool brand, but we are not really lifting the user journey and not really joining it into to the call to action. It's a broad question, but all of that depends on I think all these three things.
I have a question concerning the examples that you also showed us. The models can be seductive in terms of these simulations. Can they tell the truth about for example, an infrastructure, or are they just used as showing the general idea of one area? I'm thinking of the example of Rail Baltic, for example, that can set the whole building into fire when you come up with a street model, for example, because people have different expectations to such projects, and you don't know how this simulation is built up, and how much of that simulation will be reality in the end.
Okay. First, we have to understand that we seek for that opinion, and we want that opinion earlier in the project in order to avoid that clash between the inhabitants and the project. If we are able to select the scale, or let's say, like in the vision cases, select the vision state, which is volumetric. Sometimes people's expectation, because we have been living in the decades of the photorealistic and overwhelming visualizations, sometimes that expectation will be, hey, it has to be like a detailed and already finished. However, with allowing people to enter, let's say, even in this volumetric level, that we are not yet saying that honestly, we're not yet sure about how it's gonna, turn out at the end, but this is why we are opening that for communication. The problem lays in that we're not yet open for that communication. We're not that ready. We fear the feedback. Like chatbots and actually we applied that in London Borough and Walthamstow. Like chatbots, like who's going to answer that, or who's going to interact with those people? Like really stuff. The planners, they're afraid of the feedback. But then again, like wasn't that the purpose of why we're doing it? So changing a little bit the mindset towards the feedback and seeing that as a part of design process is, I think, one of the first steps that the planners have to take. And then maximizing the value out of technology, and applying that in the right spots is our way, and how to strategically really like be more efficient and more maybe resilient even in the process, and more sustainable in the process of how we're dealing with the feedback. So yeah, in a way, real-time technologies that are based on the 3D models, are actually tackling very simplified, very like functional aspects, and don't want to imply the ready-made result, but just announce that our city, our block, our project, it's an ongoing thing, and we are the ones that actually shaping it.
Thank you. That's an important note, that the model should be around before it is being constructed, not after it is the construction is already going on. So we don't need the model then. That's
a big shift in the industry, because this is not how it's happening. Even in architectural vision competitions, architects are doing just part of the buildings, let's say, then rendering them and then photoshopping the rest with all the, the vision and utopia. Because so far there haven't been medium that would be able to express that feeling, because you got to embed that feeling and that vision into that image. Therefore, you have to put kids with balloons and smiley people and all these kind of hacks, right? And visualization is everything. Architects are just paying loads of money just for one image, just to sell the vision. Now we have the medium that is able to communicate the space vividly, I gotta say. That's where the name actually comes from, so that it's not overwhelmed, it's not exaggerated, it is what it is. It is a space, it's a narrow, wide, it tackles your feeling rather than your perception of how things should be and what sells and what not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gunita.
Thanks.